The old man's hands were shaking so badly that 3 pennies rolled off the counter and hit the grocery store floor like tiny gunshots. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And standing only a few feet behind him, one of the most famous men in America suddenly felt something twist hard inside his chest. Because the veteran was trying to decide whether he could afford food or dignity. October 14th, 1960, Memphis, Friday evening. The kind of humid southern night where the air felt thick enough to drink. Neon lights buzzed outside the small neighborhood grocery store, while tired workers drifted through the aisles in silence, grabbing bread, milk, cigarettes, cheap dinners. Nothing special. Just another ordinary night. Except it wouldn't stay ordinary for long. By then, Elvis Presley wasn't just famous. He was untouchable. His face covered magazines. His songs swallowed radio stations whole. Women screamed when he walked into rooms. Men copied his hair, his clothes, his voice. Everywhere he went, the world treated him like a king. But inside this little Memphis grocery store near Graceland, he could breathe again. No bodyguards, no cameras, no chaos. Just Elvis. The workers here had known him before the money, before the screaming crowds, before Hollywood. To them, he was still the polite Southern kid who said, "Yes, ma'am," helped old women carry groceries, and waited in line like everyone else. That night, Elvis wore plain jeans and a faded button shirt. Nothing flashy, no sunglasses, no attempt to hide. Because this was the one place left where he didn't have to pretend. He grabbed a basket and moved slowly through the aisles, tossing in milk, bread, sandwich meat, peanut butter. Small things. Weekend things. But halfway down the canned goods aisle, he noticed someone. An old man, thin, slow-moving, one hand gripping a cane, and one pant leg pinned empty below the knee. Elvis instinctively slowed his pace. The veteran moved carefully, almost mechanically, studying every price tag as if each number carried life or death consequences. He'd pick up a can, pause, read the label, look at the price, then either place it gently in his basket or quietly return it to the shelf. Every decision hurt to watch. Elvis kept shopping, but his eyes drifted back toward the man again and again. Something about him felt heavy, not weak, not helpless. Proud. That was the word. The kind of pride forged in fire. The old man wore a clean button-up shirt, despite its age. On his chest sat a tiny military pin. Most shoppers probably never noticed it. Elvis did. And suddenly the store around him faded. Because Elvis knew that look. He'd seen it in soldiers overseas during his own army service in Germany. Men who carried invisible weight behind their eyes. Men who never complained, even when life had taken pieces of them. This man had that same look. A survivor's look. Minutes later, Elvis headed toward checkout and found only one register open. The veteran was already there. The cashier, Dorothy, smiled warmly. "Evening, Mr. Peterson." The old man nodded politely. "Still breathing. That's enough these days." There was humor in his voice, but exhaustion underneath it. Elvis stepped into line behind him and watched the groceries slide across the counter one by one. Bread, milk, eggs, butter, 2 cans of soup. Nothing extra, nothing enjoyable, just survival. The kind of groceries bought by someone calculating every single cent before entering the store. Dorothy totaled the order. "That'll be $4.35. Mr. Peterson reached into his coat pocket and removed a tiny coin purse. The moment it opened, Elvis felt his stomach tighten. Pennies, nickels, dimes. The old veteran began counting slowly with trembling fingers. One stack, then another. His lips moved silently while he added numbers in his head. The line behind Elvis grew slightly longer now, but nobody complained. The store had gone strangely quiet, almost like everyone sensed they were witnessing something painfully personal. Mr. Peterson counted again, and again, then stopped. His eyes lowered. "I'm 15 cents short." The words barely came out. Dorothy immediately shook her head. "That's all right, Mr. Peterson." "No." The response came sharp, instant, not angry, proud. The old man straightened slightly despite the cane. "I don't take charity." Those words hit Elvis harder than he expected, because there was no bitterness in them, only dignity, pure dignity. Mr. Peterson stared at his groceries like a man preparing for surgery, trying to decide which necessity mattered least. His hand hovered above the eggs, then the butter, finally the soup. "One can'll do," he muttered quietly. And for one terrible second, Elvis saw it. Not the grocery store, not the old man. Normandy, mud, smoke, gunfire. Young soldiers torn apart on foreign beaches while bullets ripped through the air. Men screaming for medics, men dying beside friends, men sacrificing pieces of themselves so strangers back home could live ordinary lives. This old man had left part of his body on a battlefield, and now he couldn't afford 2 cans of soup. Something inside Elvis snapped, not dramatically, not loudly, quietly. The dangerous kind of anger. He reached forward and lightly touched Dorothy's arm. "I'll cover it," he mouthed silently. Dorothy looked at him, then at the veteran, then back at Elvis. Her eyes softened immediately, but Elvis shook his head once. No embarrassment, no spotlight, no humiliation. Dorothy understood. "Actually," she suddenly said brightly, "Mr. Peterson, I forgot we started a soup promotion today. Buy one, get one free." The old man frowned instantly. "Since when?" "Today." "You sure?" "Positive." Mr. Peterson stared at her for several seconds, suspicion mixed with hope inside his tired eyes. Because poor people learn something most others never do. Nothing is ever free. Still, the possibility of keeping both soup cans pulled visibly against his pride. Dorothy smiled warmly. "Matter of fact, with the discount, you've got enough left for coffee." The veteran blinked. "Coffee? I know you like coffee." For the first time all evening, something changed in the old man's face. Not happiness, something sadder, the memory of happiness. "Haven't had coffee in near 3 weeks," he admitted softly. Elvis looked away for a second, because that sentence hurt more than it should have. 3 weeks. 3 weeks without something so small, most people wasted it daily without thinking. Dorothy nodded toward the aisle. "Go grab one." Mr. Peterson hesitated, then slowly turned and made his way back through the store, cane tapping softly against the linoleum floor. The second he disappeared around the corner, Elvis stepped forward fast. "How much for everything?" "With extra groceries?" Dorothy whispered. "Fill the bags." Dorothy stared at him. "Whatever a man needs for a decent week. Meat, vegetables, bread, coffee, everything." "Elvis." He fought for this country. The words came low and rough. Not celebrity rough. Human rough. Elvis pulled out a $20 bill and shoved it gently toward her. And don't let him know. Dorothy's eyes watered immediately. You're a good man. Elvis glanced toward the aisle where the veteran slowly searched for coffee. No, he said quietly. He is.
Mr. Peterson stood near the exit with the small can of coffee pressed tightly against his chest, like it was something fragile enough to disappear if he loosened his grip. The fluorescent lights above him flickered softly, while people moved around the store pretending not to stare. But everyone was staring. Not because they recognized Elvis Presley, because they recognized pain. Real pain. The kind people usually avoid looking at. Dorothy carefully packed the groceries while Elvis watched the old veteran from several feet away. Something about the man's posture bothered him deeply. Mr. Peterson stood like someone trained never to ask for help. Even now, after believing luck had saved him, he looked uncomfortable accepting it, like survival itself embarrassed him. You sure you counted right? Mr. Peterson asked Dorothy again. She forced a natural smile. Positive. The veteran nodded slowly, though uncertainty still lingered behind his eyes. Then he picked up the grocery bag carefully with one hand while balancing himself on the cane. And Elvis saw it. The strain, the hidden physical pain. Every movement cost the old man something. Not dramatic pain, silent pain. The kind carried by men who learned long ago nobody was coming to save them. Excuse me, sir, Elvis suddenly said. Mr. Peterson turned. Recognition flashed immediately across the old veteran's face. His tired eyes widened slightly. Well, I'll be damned. Elvis smiled politely and stepped closer. I noticed your service pin. For a second, Mr. Peterson instinctively touched the small pin on his chest, almost protectively. European theater, he said quietly. World War II. How long'd you serve? Long enough. There was no pride in the answer, only memory. Dark memory. Elvis nodded slowly. Army changed me, too. That caught the old man off guard. You served? Germany, Elvis replied. Just got back not long ago. Mr. Peterson stared at him differently now, not like a celebrity, like a soldier. And suddenly the space between them changed. Because men who wear uniforms recognize each other in ways civilians never understand. You know then, Mr. Peterson murmured. Elvis tilted his head slightly. Know what? The veteran looked down at his missing leg. What it costs. The words settled heavily into the air. Around them, the grocery store noise seemed to fade again. Shopping carts rolled in distant aisles. A refrigerator motor hummed softly somewhere near the dairy section. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly over Memphis. But between the two men, silence carried more weight than sound. Mr. Peterson shifted slightly against the cane. Most folks see this leg and think that's the hardest part. His fingers tapped the wooden cane once. But it ain't. Elvis didn't interrupt. The hardest part, the veteran continued softly, is remembering faces. His eyes drifted somewhere far away now, not inside the store anymore. France. They were boys, he whispered. Most of us were boys. Elvis felt a chill crawl slowly up his spine. I still hear some of them at night. Dorothy stopped bagging groceries for a moment. Even the customers nearby had gone still, because the old veteran wasn't talking to them anymore. He was confessing to ghosts. "We landed before sunrise," Mr. Peterson continued. "Water was red before we even reached shore." His breathing changed slightly, slower, more fragile. "Machine guns cut through men like rain through paper." His jaw tightened. "You ever watch your best friend disappear right beside you?" Elvis swallowed hard. "No, sir." Mr. Peterson nodded once. "Pray you never do." The old man's eyes looked wet now, but he refused to let tears fall. That pride again, that brutal generation of men taught to suffer quietly. "I was 21, he said. "Thought I was invincible." A faint smile appeared for half a second. Funny how war fixes that. Elvis felt something painful tightening in his chest.
Because suddenly the missing leg wasn't the tragedy anymore. The tragedy was everything invisible. The nightmares, the guilt, the memories, the loneliness, the forgotten sacrifice. And worst of all, this man fought a war for his country, then came home to count pennies for soup. Elvis looked around the grocery store slowly. Bright advertisements, candy racks, magazines, cold Coca-Cola bottles. Ordinary American life, all built on the backs of men like Mr. Peterson. And nobody even noticed anymore. "You know what hurts most?" the veteran asked suddenly. Elvis looked at him. Mr. Peterson smiled faintly, but it wasn't happiness. People stopped remembering. That sentence hit harder than any dramatic speech ever could. Not anger, not bitterness, just truth. The old man adjusted his grip on the grocery bag. "Not asking for parades, not asking for sympathy." He shrugged lightly. "Just strange sometimes. You survive hell, and then one day you realize the world kept moving without you." Elvis had no answer for that, because there wasn't one. A teenage boy near the magazine rack quietly lowered the comic book he'd been pretending to read. A woman standing beside the frozen foods wiped tears from her face without realizing it. The entire store could feel the weight hanging in the air now. Mr. Peterson noticed the silence and gave a tired chuckle. "Listen to me rambling. Old men talk too much." "No," Elvis said immediately. His voice came stronger than expected. "No, sir. People don't listen enough." That made the veteran pause. For the first time all evening, his expression softened completely. Not because of the compliment, because Elvis meant it. "You're a respectful young man," Mr. Peterson said quietly. "My mama raised me right. That's rare these days." Elvis glanced at the cane. "You heading home alone?" The veteran nodded. "Apartment's only a few blocks." "You got family nearby?" The hesitation lasted barely a second, but Elvis noticed. "Had a wife," Mr. Peterson said softly. "Cancer took her 3 winters ago." The words landed like a punch. "And my daughter moved north after her husband found work." He forced another faint smile. "Granddaughter writes me letters, though. She's crazy about your music." Elvis smiled gently. "What's her name?" "Sarah." "How old?" 10. "That's a good age." "She says one day she's going to marry you." For the first time that night, genuine laughter escaped Elvis. Warm, human, real. "Well, I better be careful then." Even Mr. Peterson laughed quietly.
and suddenly the tension cracked just enough for the store to breathe again. But then the veteran shifted his weight wrong. A flash of pain crossed his face instantly, fast, sharp. He nearly lost balance. Elvis reacted without thinking, grabbing his arm. Mr. Peterson stiffened immediately. Not out of anger. Instinct. Soldier instinct. For 1 second his eyes looked terrified, like he was back in combat. Then reality returned. "You all right?" Elvis asked. The veteran nodded quickly, embarrassed. "Bad hip sometimes." But Elvis knew that wasn't the full truth. War had destroyed this man, piece by piece, and now age was finishing the job. Dorothy quietly pushed the extra grocery bags closer to Elvis behind the counter. Bags filled with meat, potatoes, vegetables, coffee, canned goods. Enough food to last weeks. Elvis glanced at them, then back at Mr. Peterson. And in that moment, something inside him became painfully clear. Fame meant absolutely nothing if you walked past suffering and did nothing. Nothing. Not the money, not the screaming fans, not the movies, not the records, nothing. Because someday, all of it disappeared. But moments like this, they stayed forever. Mr. Peterson adjusted the grocery bag again. "Well," he said quietly, "I better get moving before this ice cream turns to soup." Dorothy blinked quickly, trying not to cry again. Elvis stepped beside the veteran. "Mind if I walk you out?" The old man looked surprised.
"You don't gotta do that."
"I know." That answer hit Mr. Peterson harder than expected, because real kindness always does. Together they slowly walked toward the exit doors, while the entire grocery store watched silently. Not watching a celebrity, watching character. And none of them realized yet, the most emotional part of the night still hadn't happened.
Rain had started falling by the time Elvis Presley helped Mr. Peterson outside. Not heavy rain, just a cold Memphis drizzle that painted the parking lot in reflections of neon and headlights. Cars rolled past slowly on the wet street, while thunder growled somewhere far away across the dark sky. Mr. Peterson adjusted the grocery bag against his chest and looked toward the sidewalk. "I'm parked down there," he said. Elvis followed his eyes. There was no car. Only a dimly lit bus stop bench sitting beneath a flickering street lamp. The realization hit like a punch. The veteran noticed Elvis noticing. "Bus comes every hour," he explained casually, almost apologetically. "Don't mind waiting." But Elvis did mind, because suddenly everything became painfully clear. This man had fought through machine gun fire on a foreign beach. Now he stood in the rain, waiting for a city bus, with barely enough groceries to survive the week. America loved heroes in photographs, but not always in real life. "You shouldn't be standing out here," Elvis said quietly. Mr. Peterson shrugged. "Wouldn't be the first storm I've survived." That line carried decades inside it. War, loss, hospitals, loneliness, forgotten birthdays, empty apartments, quiet suffering. Elvis stared at the old man for several seconds before speaking again. "Let me drive you home." The veteran immediately shook his head. "Oh, no, no, sir. You've already been kind enough." "It's raining." "I've walked through worse." "I know." Those two words stopped the old man cold, because Elvis understood something most people didn't. Proud men often refuse help, not because they don't need it, but because life already made them feel like burdens. Elvis stepped closer. "You served this country. Least I can do is give you a ride home."
Mr. Peterson looked away toward the wet street. His jaw tightened slightly. He hated needing anything from anyone. Elvis could see the internal battle happening in real time. Finally, the veteran exhaled slowly.
"All right," he muttered. "Long as I ain't troubling you." "You're not." And Elvis meant it. They walked through the rain toward Elvis's car parked near the edge of the lot. Dorothy stood inside the grocery store watching through the glass doors, one hand covering her mouth as emotion overwhelmed her again. She'd seen wealthy people before, movie stars, businessmen, politicians. Most of them carried importance like armor. But Elvis carried humanity, and that was rarer. Inside the car, the heater hummed softly, while rain tapped against the windows. Mr. Peterson held the grocery bag carefully on his lap, as if afraid something might spill. For several moments, neither man spoke. Then quietly, the veteran asked, "You ever lose anybody over there?" Elvis gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Not in combat." Mr. Peterson nodded slightly. "Still counts." Elvis glanced at him. "My mama almost died while I was overseas," he admitted softly. "Thought about her every night." The veteran looked out the window. "That fear never leaves a man." The city lights slid across the windshield as they drove through wet Memphis streets. "You know something strange," Mr. Peterson suddenly said. "What's that?" "When I came home from the war, crowds were everywhere." He smiled faintly at the memory. Flags, music, handshakes. His eyes lowered. Then years passed. His voice became quieter now. And little by little, everybody moved on. Elvis felt those words deep in his chest, because fame had already started teaching him the same lesson. Crowds disappear, applause fades, people forget. "You think people forgot you?" Elvis asked. Mr. Peterson stared at the rain sliding down the glass. "No," he answered slowly. "I think life just keeps going." That sentence somehow hurt even worse. No bitterness, no blame, just acceptance, the saddest kind. A few minutes later, Elvis turned into a run-down apartment complex on the edge of town. Paint peeled from the buildings. Several windows were boarded up. Rainwater collected in broken pavement cracks. Mr. Peterson looked embarrassed immediately. "Ain't much," he muttered. Elvis parked the car and looked at the building silently, because heroes weren't supposed to end up here. Not after sacrificing pieces of themselves for their country, not after surviving war, not after losing blood on foreign soil. But reality didn't care about what people deserved. Reality only cared who got left behind. Elvis grabbed the extra grocery bags from the back seat before the veteran could protest. "You don't gotta carry those." "I know." Again, the same answer. Simple. Heavy. They slowly climbed the apartment stairs together, while rain hammered the metal railing beside them. Mr. Peterson struggled slightly with each step, though he clearly tried hiding it. At apartment 2B, he unlocked the door, and Elvis felt his heart crack open. The place was tiny, painfully tiny. Old furniture, a weak yellow lamp, a small television with aluminum foil wrapped around the antenna. A military photograph sat framed beside the couch, showing a young, smiling soldier standing with 3 friends. Only one of them made it home. "You live here alone?" Elvis asked softly. Mr. Peterson nodded. "Quiet place." But it didn't feel quiet. It felt lonely. The veteran placed his groceries on the table carefully, while Elvis quietly unpacked the extra bags. Bread, coffee, fresh meat,
potatoes, vegetables, canned food, more than Mr. Peterson had probably seen in weeks. The old man stared in confusion. "That wasn't in my bag." Elvis kept unloading calmly. "Guess Dorothy really likes those sales." Mr. Peterson looked at him for a long moment, and suddenly, he knew. Not everything, but enough. The veteran's eyes became glassy. "You paid for this." Elvis didn't answer immediately, because lies would insult him, but truth might humiliate him. Finally, Elvis spoke softly. "You earned it a long time ago." Silence filled the apartment. Heavy silence.
Mr. Peterson looked down at the food covering his table, then at his missing leg, then at Elvis, and for the first time all night, the old soldier broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. One tear rolled slowly down his weathered face. "That beach took everything from some men," he whispered. "Everything." Elvis felt his own throat tighten painfully. Mr. Peterson wiped his eyes fast, ashamed of the emotion. "Sorry." "You don't apologize for that." The veteran shook his head slowly. "World moved on. Sometimes feels like maybe we were supposed to disappear too." "No." Elvis said it instantly, strong, certain. "No, sir. Men like you are the reason this country exists." The old man stared at him, and Elvis realized something important in that moment. Fame gave people attention, but respect had to be earned. Mr. Peterson slowly lowered himself into the chair near the kitchen table. His eyes drifted toward the old war photograph again. 3 boys in that picture died before 22, he murmured. I used to ask God why I got to come home instead. Elvis sat quietly across from him. I think maybe, he said carefully, you came home so people could remember what courage looks like. The veteran looked down and finally cried for real. Not because of the groceries, not because of the money, because somebody still remembered. Outside, rain continued falling softly against the windows, while 2 men sat silently inside a tiny apartment neither of them would ever forget. One was called the King of Rock and Roll. The other was a forgotten soldier. But that night, only one of them felt like the hero. Years later, after Elvis Presley died, stories about his generosity spread across America. Hospitals, donations, gifts, quiet acts of kindness nobody knew about until long after they happened. But people in Memphis remembered this story differently, because it wasn't about money. It was about dignity. About a famous man seeing an invisible veteran and refusing to let him feel invisible anymore. Dorothy would later say something that stayed with people forever. Most celebrities wanted to be seen. Elvis wanted other people to be seen.